We're good? Okay. Good evening, and welcome to the council meeting of June 30th, 2025. This meeting is being live streamed on the Town of Kentville's YouTube channel. Before we move forward on today's agenda, I want to take a moment and express our deep appreciation to someone who has played an essential role during a time of transition for our council in the Town of Kentville. Mr. Matheson, on behalf of council and our entire community, thank you for stepping in as interim CAO and providing steady, thoughtful leadership over the past 4 months. These months have been a period of change, new directions, new priorities, and important decisions to be made. Through it all, your experience, your calm guidance, and your unwavering professionalism have been invaluable to us. With your support, we've accomplished a great deal in a short amount of time, and your ability to keep the organization steady while helping council move forward with clarity and confidence has not gone unnoticed. So today we simply say thank you for stepping in when we needed you, and thank you for helping guide council through this important chapter. We are sincerely grateful. I would also
thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Very kind.
Yes, there. I would also like to wish everyone a very happy Canada Day tomorrow. Let's take pride in the strength, diversity, and unity that make our country so special. We do have one regret this evening from Councillor Andrew. However, the chair notes that we do have quorum, so I'll call this meeting to order. I respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional and unceded lands of the Mi'kmaq people. We honor their deep connection to this land, past, present, and future. And I also recognize and honor the contributions and heritage of African Nova Scotians, whose ancestors have shaped and enriched this community for generations. I'll begin by asking if there's any conflict of interest issues we should be made aware of before the meeting commences. There being none, we'll move right along to approval of the agenda. We've been provided with a proposed agenda. I do have one change. Under accessibility committee recommendations, item number 4, I'm looking to strike those 2 items as this matter has been dealt with. Any objections to removing those? There being none, CO, do you have any changes, additions, or deletions to the agenda?
No, there may be a slight change in the motion for the appointment of the new CAO, but it's fairly minor. We'll deal with it as that comes up.
Okay. All right, I will take a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Deputy Mayor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. All those in favor signify by raising. Those opposed, motion's carried. We have several sets of minutes that we need to have approved. Council meeting minutes of May 26, 2025. Are there any changes to that set of minutes? There being none, we'll file those. The meeting minutes of June 12th, 2025. We will file those. June 17th, 2025. We will file those. And special joint council meeting on June 23rd, 2025. Those will be filed. And the last set is June 24th, 2025. Okay, those are all filed as and will be recorded. We have a special presentation tonight, so I will invite the Mayor of Kings County up, Mayor Corkum. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Zabian and Council. It's certainly a pleasure to be invited here this evening to bring you a regional sewer update. This brings back a lot of memories for me. I spent 25 years in this council chambers, and I have to admit I was a little disappointed when I arrived tonight. I thought for sure I'd have the prettiest and brightest shirt on, but I'm not even close third place. But anyway, it's my privilege to introduce our staff people that will do the presentation on the regional sewer tonight. Scott Conrad, our CAO, is here with us, along with Martin Kehoe, who is our manager of environmental services. And they'll be doing all the presentations and answering all the tough questions. So unless you got something real easy, I'll go back to my seat and be quiet. Thanks again for having us.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm Scott Conrad, and Martin Kehoe is here to my right. I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Savage, who's been quite a long-serving member of the Regional Subcommittee, the Regional Sewer Committee. So this evening, we've kind of bucketed things out into three categories. I want to state off the top that I'm not a subject matter expert. I've gone through this a couple of times. I would say on a personal note, I wish I wasn't here this evening, and I wish you weren't going through what you're going through. It's really unfortunate. So the three buckets that we propose to address are answers to frequently asked questions. We try to keep this as a living document, so every presentation we make, people have input, and we try to incorporate and answer some of those questions. Even if we don't have the questions tonight, we'll get back to you when we post that on our website. The second bucket here is a report on a pre-design report that we had commissioned in February of this year, and also the last item will be some partner updates, or items at least. So in terms of frequently asked questions, here are some of the common ones that we've heard. Some of them are fairly intuitive. So for example, why are the lagoons smelling? And my understanding, having gone through this in several communities, particularly communities that have biological plants, and this is a very large biological plant, is that the bacteria consume waste through these 5 treatment lagoons. Sometimes we refer to them as cells, just to try to confuse people, but we'll try to keep it to lagoons here this evening. What happens is we add air to the incoming wastewater through blowers and oxygen diffusers in those lagoons, so they're heavily aerated. Healthy bacteria need air. If they don't have enough air, it's not a good thing, and that's primarily what the subject matter experts are telling us current day. It's an imbalance between the strength of the influent and the amount of air in the water. So in the past, we've had very dated and plugged aerators that did not supply enough air in the lagoons. And as I just said, right now the leading explanation that at least I'm receiving is that we are out of balance in lagoons 1 and 2 in terms of the strength of the incoming waste. So here's a picture of what was replaced, and every time I do this, I forget when I go back to the office. I think between Lagoon 1 and 2, in Lagoon 1, I think there was approximately maybe 700 aerators and 500 aerators in Lagoon 2. So, and these were decommissioned here a couple of years ago and taken out. It really doesn't do service, this photo. These are each about 36 inches in circumference and about 5 feet high. So it's like a forest of these aerators that were in the water. We've taken those out, and although not a great picture, the picture on the right shows what was the replacement technology, which is a diffuser. And from a common sort of lay perspective, we went from an aerator that had big gulps of air coming up into water to a finer bubble coming up in the water through aeration to try to inject more air into the water. So the next obvious question is what is being done to eliminate the smell? So the air blower supplying oxygen to lagoons 1 and 2 have been upgraded and reconfigured. The air blower supplying to lagoons 3, 4, and 5 were tuned during the first week of June. I'll give kudos to the gentleman to my right here. He was in charge of that, and we've actually increased, as you'll see here in a couple slides, the air input into 3, 4, and 5 by about 70%. We've been adding an oxygen boosting compound, and mechanical mixers were added to lagoons 1 and 2. So here's a graphic of the new high-energy blower installation that have been in operation since June 16th. Now, interestingly enough, they were ordered last winter. So they were ordered before we knew we were going to be in the situation that we're in. So they're now in operation. Those are lagoons 1 and 2. The ones that have increased by 70%, these are supplying aeration to 3, 4, and 5. And there's a picture of these. So I always get my acronyms mixed up, Martin, but it's frequency, variable VFDs, variable frequency drives? Correct. Wow, okay. So those were tuned to ramp up the amount going in, and so this is done in consultation with professional engineers, process engineers, and there's some math that goes into this in terms of head loss and friction loss in the pipe and whatnot. So we have encountered, thinking we were doing good by ramping things up, only to be injecting less air in the water because we had increased, we were combating our own input through friction loss in the pipe and whatnot. So some more rudimentary stuff, but this is, I think we're on dose 3 now. Of an oxygen boosting compound that we've been putting in large quantities. So on the left, you'll see a tanker that's on site, and on the right, So there's an initial dosing that happens, we've done that twice, and then there's a maintenance dosing that happens in this tote that's shown here on the right. An example of mechanical mixers that are in operation in the lagoons. Again, these were placed in temporarily to try to inject more air into those waters in those lagoons. More recent advice and work. So we have ordered materials to add an additional diffuser string in Lagoon 2, and that's about 1 to 2 weeks out, and staff will install that. And again, that's to address what our engineering consultant is saying. It's the lack of air in the water. That's the cause. We have continued to dose with this oxygen boosting supplement. There's an engineered design that we received for 7 to 8 additional diffuser strings in Lagoon 1. So that very first slide I showed you on the right with the diffusers in, there's going to be actually 7 to 8, we're not entirely sure yet, additional diffuser strings added there. There's an 8-week delivery on that, but we are trying to expedite. And that's 8 weeks basically up to date, but we're doing our best to find them. We've contacted every municipality that has similar equipment. We've contacted the distributor, we've contacted the supplier, so we're doing our utmost to try to get those in the water. It's a little confusing to ourselves and to the professional consultants in that cell 2 seems to be worse than cell 1. So right now with the 70% more air in 3, 4, 5, we're seeing good levels of dissolved oxygen. The effluent level is hovering around
probably between 1.5 and 2 right now.
So that's above our regulated requirement for DO levels. So they seem to be good. Cell 1, we see some very modest increase in DO levels, but for some reason cell 2 is not recovering. So the other piece of advice that we've been working through, and we're really appreciative, we've kind of re-energized because of the crisis that we're going through, the technical subcommittee, and your engineer, David Bell, is a real strong member on that subcommittee. And it kind of reminds me a bit about being in a room of lawyers and getting different opinions with fewer number of lawyers than the opinions that you receive. But it's an interesting debate back and forth about what size these drum screens. So if you can envision the influent coming in, one of the first things it does through a grit chamber and then into a building that has large screens in it, it screens things out. And it's supposed to identify a lot of the organics or remove a fair amount of the organics before it hits Lagoon 1. And so there's been a lot of conjecture over the years about what the size of those screens would be. So from an operational point of view, we had screens in that we thought were too small and they were blinding, and our operators were doing nothing between 8 and 10 hours a day cleaning screens. And if it got ahead of them, they'd open the door the next morning and they would see the onset of waste coming towards them. So then we probably overreacted with some advice and put too large of a screen mesh size in, which we're not pulling enough out of Lagoon 1 now before it hits there. So now we're in an in-between stage. So that punch steel has arrived and our staff are fabricating that and they're getting it ready for installation. Another one that we've been working at, sort of everything that we think is a variable that we can control, we're trying to do. So if you're trying to buy and this is not supposed to be funny, but if you're trying to buy a swim noodle in Kentville somewhere, you can't find one because we've bought them all and we've created booms to boom all of the stuff that's floating on the top over to the side to vacuum out with our large vacuum truck. So that tends to be a bit more raw sewage, so that shouldn't be having a bearing, but it might have a bearing. So like I say, any type of variable that we think we can influence, we're doing. So I think the next slide is a picture of, you can see down in the corner here of one of those swim noodles that's got turned into a barrier to or a line to remove this floating mat, and that's our truck with an arm out there removing one of those floating mats. So far, I think in the last week and a half, we've taken 30 loads out of those lagoons by skimming off the surfaces. So another question is the length of time for waste processing. My background has been in more communities that had technology referred to as SBR, or sequence batch reactor plants, which is processing in large tanks. And if you have a problem, it's in a tank and you get rid of the tank. It's done. Within a matter of a couple of days, if you have a problem, you can deal with it. Unfortunately for us, it migrates through all 5 of these lagoons before it eventually overpasses a rack of UV lights and disinfected, and then that effluent goes to the river. So that takes about 60 days from the time it reaches the inlet, by the time it goes through those 5 lagoons to the point of discharge. So when something goes wrong and you're out of balance for a period of time. So the 2010 regulations, so there's been, in community meetings that we've had and our own council meetings, there's been some discussion about biosolids and what do you do with municipal biosolids and can you be a bit more efficient with biosolids. In a slide coming up, I'll show you what we've taken out in the last couple of years and the amount of money that's been associated with that. But between 21 and 24, we've extracted more than 11,000 metric tons from the lagoons, and that doesn't include geotubes. And when I reference geotubes, you can see these look like very large black socks on the back of the lagoon. And there's actually, I believe, 3 on the bottom and 2 on the top. So one of our desludging efforts did not take it off site, it pumped it into these dewatering socks. And there's a structural pad built, they tilt back towards the pond, so they dewater under their own weight, and the liquid goes back and gets reprocessed as part of that technology. We probably would have handled more on site, but we just don't have the physical footprint to do more geotubes on site. So regional produces what's referred to in the regulation as a Class B municipal biosolid, and we've been measuring the buildup of biosolids with sonar technology. So for example, the last couple of years, I believe we've gone through 3 rounds of sonar, and we're trying to keep the ponds at an optimal level. So we hear quite common in public discourse, you know, the problem is you haven't been desludging. The fact is we have taken 11,000 ton out, and we keep track of it, and we're trying to do better on keeping it in balance, but it appears to be more of a strength issue of the stuff coming in. And we also have desludging a Lagoon 2 is planned for the fall, because we had taken Lagoon 1 off for a period of time here in 2024, and Cell 2, or Lagoon 2, became the primary. So that hasn't had its normal course of buildup. It's built up a little faster because for a period of time it was the primary cell receiving everything. Again, we had that sonared, we had the contract out, we had all that in place before the upset. Last year, when we had recommissioned the plant, we had numbers in relative to our operating permit were probably the best numbers we'd ever seen. So we thought, you know, look, we have a period of time to address this. We didn't think it was gone forever and a day, but the plant was running really well until this spring. So past experience with the biosolids, again, you're going to see a little bit of an accounting of the expense coming up, is they, under 2010 regulations, they will allow you to land apply a municipal biosolid. But typically in our operations, so for example, Greenwood is what is referred to as an extended aeration plant. And if you were to go there, it has a roll-on, roll-off container, and there's a press, and it just presses, and you know exactly, is it once a week probably, we have a truck that comes in and takes that roll-on, roll-off container full of municipal biosolids and takes it to a private enterprise who has a license from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, and they process it through windrows. So they put it in windrows and they turn it over. That's fine when you know your constant and steady type of output, and that's how their license is permitted. It doesn't deal with what I would refer to as gluts. So when you're taking 20,000 cubic meters out of the ponds at regional, that's far beyond what they can manage in a windrow operation. You can also use it, according to the regulations, you can directly apply it to land within a wastewater plant. Unfortunately, we do not have enough real estate within we have 8 plants, the municipality, this is one of them, and none of them do we have sufficient land area to do that. The interpretation of that regulation, it's a topping, so you're talking 3 inches, 2 or 3 inches. You're not talking about putting 2 or 3 feet of Class B down. It can be used in a second generation landfill operation for daily cover or cell closure, but cannot be stockpiled. This is something that we put quite a bit of effort in our last very large desludging at regional, and we actually had an owner, one of our municipal partners, who was willing to take it, but you can't stockpile it. So that became a non-starter for us in that you had to use it the day that it came. So other municipal experience in this space is if you can stockpile it for a year and it dewaters under its own weight, and you have a system where it takes the liquid back to the leachate plant that typically accompanies a Class 2 plant, so the liquids are treated, that it becomes a very good field dressing. They don't have to haul in burrow from a pit off-site, so your carbon footprint is less, your expense is less. So we had a very attractive tip fee arranged, and this was going to be a Nova Scotia delivery as opposed to taking it all the way to the Miramichi, which we were forced to do. We could not get the regulatory permit to allow us to stockpile it in this operation. So Class B materials, as I say, have stockpile restrictions. Class A and B materials have storage restrictions, some of which relate to drinking water supplies. If you were to take an overlay of the Village of New Minus's source water protection plan, there's 5 wells that are very close proximity to the regional plant. So that's another, I would say, hurdle or impediment to keeping it on site. It's right in the middle of their drinking water well field. Other municipalities have had similar experiences, so to the best of my knowledge, I stand to be corrected. You know, HRM deals with a company at the airport, and they pasteurize their product and then they pelletize it, but they're basically at capacity handling that. Colchester goes to the Miramichi, like we were going to the Miramichi, and I understand where I'm coming from most recently in Pictou County, they're all now going to the Miramichi. So it kind of indicates to me that we need a Nova Scotia solution to this. So we're trying to revisit that prior to the 25 removal period that we have scheduled for cell 2. So it's a little bit of an accounting exercise here, and it's a bit fluid because we're still closing out year end, but this tries to capture the period from 1920 to 24-25. So you can see overall we've spent about 12.5 million. So this is another thing where you go to meetings and people say, is money the problem? Are you not spending money? Do you not have the money to spend? So we certainly, ourselves, our partners, and I'm a strong partner here with the town of Kentville. As a matter of fact, you're the lion's share. You're the dominant partner in terms of the expense. It's about 12.5 million. You can see here that the aeration and plant that was referred to with these new diffusers, replacing the aeration system, is about 4.5 million. And the sludge management that I referred to is 4.6 million. And you can see down below that is made up of 3,058,000 on the desludge disposal was 710, so that's the tipping fee in the Miramichi, and about $880,000 to get it to the Miramichi. So there's the 4.6 million. And then I'm rounding up, taking a little bit of liberty, saying 11,000 tons. It's 10,939, but again, it doesn't include the weight that's on site in those 5 geotubes. Another one is the size of the system. People want to know, what is the size of the system, and wastewater systems. No one thinks about them until something goes wrong, and that's a really unfortunate thing that we're all experiencing. Our system is fairly large, so it includes all the residents and businesses and industry and institutional users between Greenwich and Colebrook. It includes residential mix, it includes businesses and industry. So for example, within the Kentville Industrial Park, the retail sector in New Minus, of course you have a retail sector. These are just speaking points, but one of the things that Martin's been working on is fats, oil, and grease. So they're called FOGs. And so that particular component of the restaurant sector at times produces a lot of fog, and we've been doing tests on wet well wizards to try to get this in a liquid form in some of our manholes, so it doesn't hit as a blob of something, but when it hits the treatment system. And of course, the Valley Regional Hospital. The other question is, okay, well, you showed what was capitalized, but what's a typical year budget? So this is the budget year that we're in now, so the March 31, 2026 year. And you can see here now that we're proposing to spend almost $2.3 million. And it's broken out in Kentville's share of about 48%, New Minus 21.4, PepsiCo 12.9, and Kings 7.7. The current year capital budget is the conveyance line replacement. So this timing of this 18-inch line that was being replaced here along your frontage of the Cornwallis River. So there's about 400,000 left to go on that contract. Aeration and desludging was 1.6 million, regional equipment. So anyway, all these total up, and you can see where I've referenced here, the wet well wizards is about 4.6 million. And again, this budget was done in advance of the upset. So we had planned a significant amount of work to try to keep ahead of it. It's coming from capital reserves, operations grants, and a debenture. So is the system at capacity? And this is one I may defer to my friend here to the right. So I kind of wish Mr. Bell was here because he speaks quite well to this point. Right now, I understand, you correct me if I'm wrong, that really you look at two components with the terms of the capacity of a system. One is flow and the other is load, and load meaning strength. And right now we're at about 50% of our design flow. Our engineering consultants, CBCL Limited, have noted that our BOD coming in, our loading, is within the design spec if our current monitoring is capturing all the incoming BOD, and we don't think it is, to be upfront about that. So the study presently underway that I'm going to go over here in another section of this study or presentation here quickly is we've been working in particular with Mr. Matheson and Mr. Bell, and we've sent letters out to municipality and the town to large commercial and institutional users. And according to the Municipal Government Act, we are allowed, if the jurisdiction's in the town, it's the town's authority. If it's in the municipality, it's the municipality authority. We are allowed to install composite samplers at these places. The industry just has to provide us, for example, with a location and access to that sampler. And you'll see here with what we're doing with the study that was previously commissioned is data is so important with this to know what type of plant we need. They need data. And these composite samplers will provide that data. And again, we had ordered samplers before the upset that we're in now. So the next part then is speaking to that. So system pre-design report. So it was commissioned in February, and it's really at a very high level. It's about pre-screening solutions. So we were talking about a grit chamber and drums and stuff here a few minutes ago. Possible conversion to alternative treatment technologies. So if we want to go away from a biological or a lagoon-based system, what would the technology be? Post-treatment, clarification, filtration, sludge management, overall sewer treatment facility optimization. It's a fairly aggressive study. Okay, so it will encompass the type of waste and projected growth and development, so it's no sense of planning for today, it's planning for tomorrow as well. We're going through, we often note that the planned growth in the town is quite significant. So, you know, we would need a system that can handle that. In my past life, we were intensively involved with what's referred to as a receiving water. So it's not just designing a plant, but it's designing a plant to meet the Federal Fisheries Act and the Nova Scotia Environment Act in terms of compliance. So there's certainly a lot of study work that's involved there. As I mentioned a minute ago, key to this study work is the installation of these composite samplers and inline monitors. So we've been having progress meetings with the technical subcommittee, and that pre-design report was actually scheduled to come out this fall, but it's been delayed. We basically said to CBCL, we're giving you a change order to help us with the crisis that we're going through now. Like, that's the first thing first, is we need to deal with this odor issue. So that's now going to be filed, not in the fall, but in hopefully early spring of 2026. So partner items. We've had some good success, in my estimation, in jointly prioritizing infrastructure applications. So the 18-inch force main from RG5, which is just behind our old building, or the Justice Center now, out through to past the town's dog park and going into the treatment plant. That's a very expensive line. That takes about 2 million gallons of waste a day through that line. And back in the day, we got together, that's an abuse of a pronoun, the municipal council, the village commission, and the town council got together and said, we will apply, this will be our only application, and we'll all state it's our #1 priority. And because we did that, we got exactly what we were looking for. So that's probably a pretty good model going forward, is for everyone to consider, in my estimation, this to be a priority, our #1 priority, and to coalesce around that point. We've already agreed, Mr. Matheson and representatives of the village and myself, we met, and we're in the throes now of updating the technical subcommittee, because we don't want to be doing things in isolation. We want to be doing things in lockstep. You know, Dave Bell, again, if he's here, if he was here, he might be saying be quiet, but he's got a great background in this stuff, so that's quite a resource to use his background. So we definitely want his input. Upcoming work that would dovetail to the pre-design report. So we've been talking about the condition and the studies that we're doing, but there's a whole other part to this. And that's, you know, going forward, I'm making a brass assumption that we're going to be into this fairly heavily. So there's issues like system ownership. So we have contracts that predate the MGA that have to look at. There's some issues that need to be dealt with there from a legal perspective. There's the governance. There's a financing. I mean, you know, one of my latter projects when I was in Pictou County was a fairly large regional plant. I know what that was back then, and that was probably only 60 to 70% of the size here. So if that's an indication, we're not talking millions, we're talking tens of millions in terms of what will be required. So there needs to have a whole financing strategy behind that, because you have other priorities, as the municipality does, as the village does. A regulatory review, as you know, we can't have one bylaw, but I see no reason why we couldn't have mirrored bylaws. And that may cause us to go into some type of contract negotiation about, well, how do we enforce that? How do we get it linked to the Summary Proceedings Act for an SOT, a summary offense ticket? If we have to go to court, which one of our solicitors represents us as the municipal crown in court? Like all of those things, I think now is the time to tidy it up from stem to stern, whether we're talking about what type of plant it is, and then also, you know, who owns and who operates and how we treat it from a regulatory perspective. So I'm sorry, I'm a little longer probably than you want. Did I mess anything up?
No, you did great.
Good. Checks in the mail.
Thank you very much, CEO Conrad. I have one question, if either you or Mr. Keogh could just speak just a little more information on the capacity size. Just because I hear that a lot, that people have this assumption that it's at capacity and that we can't develop, and I just wish you could speak a little bit more on that.
So, based on last year's, through you, Mr. Mayor, through last year's averages, we averaged about 8,000 cubic meters a day coming into that facility.
Okay.
And that facility's design rate is just under 16,000.
Okay.
So we're at half capacity for flow on average. But we're, like Mr. Conrad was saying, the load coming in, we cannot handle that at present day.
Okay.
BOD loading.
Okay. Thank you. I'll open the floor to council. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the BOD loading is going to be researched by putting sensors, or what did you call them?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, it's composite samplers.
Composite samplers.
Yes.
So one of those being launched, when do you expect to get your first round of data?
I can take a swing at this. So we do have there's a couple different variations on this. So we have some now that that are close to us. We don't have them in our hands yet, but they're in the city. We've ordered more. I think there will be 4 in total. Plus there's one on the effluent line, I think, isn't there?
Correct.
Yeah, so, and some of them will be, for example, RG5 would be a logical place because that's where everything collects from Colebrook down through, including the town. And then others would be industrial users or the institutional user, the hospital. Those are composite samplers. We do have technology already in RG5 which uses a proxy measurement. So it does these samples and it'll tell you where the load is relative to a trend line. And if it's up, it's BOD. If it's down, there's something else in the system going on. So we have those readings now. And they've been kind of indicating to us that we do see larger shots of material coming in at certain times.
Of material?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's why the screen size is important?
Yes.
Right on.
That's one of the attributes.
So
yes.
four composite sensors at different points in the system, but not particular to one particular user, or you'd have
right.
one main coming from the industrial park, and you'd be able to measure what's coming from that, and then
Right. So through
Does
you,
that get mixed in?
through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Baker. So it kind of depends, I guess, is an answer on that. So it depends on how a plant, for example, in the industrial park, may be connected. So it might be right at the plant, or it might be in the line downstream of the plant.
sorry, the sensor is going where?
So
There
the
are 4 of
sensors,
them?
if there's a direct feed from that line, if there's a place to connect it,
Right.
we would connect it at the plant.
Okay,
The plant being the industry plant.
so
The
is this
industrial
something
plant.
that's mobile? Are they gonna stay there for a while?
They would stay there for a while, but they are mobile, but they would be fixed there for a period of time.
Okay.
And again, it ties back to the work of CBCL and their pre-design report to know, and again, this is a layperson's perspective on what they're doing, is to know whether you were going with extended aeration or a sequence batch reactor plant, or you're going with some other type of technology. They need to know the strength.
Okay, because the strength coming in is predicted by what you can treat, right? Or the strength that you're ideally looking for is
Right.
based on what you are able to treat.
Right,
Okay,
matched to technology.
right. And so how long are those sensors going to be in place? Because we know a lot of our industrial park is seasonal, right? Well, we know that we go through a lot of apples at certain times of year. If they're cleaning manufacturing equipment with caustic solvents, that's going to kill your bacteria. So I'm just wondering if, are they gonna be there long enough to give us data, or is it something that we're gonna have to move around?
The plan,
Quickly.
the discussions that the technical subcommittee has had on that is these are permanent installations. So they'll
Okay.
be grabbing data now for.
Forever. So it's not just you're building your armory.
Well, the four will be there, for those will be the key points. Now, you can probably I know you can do a better job with inline monitoring if we want to crack that open. But there's composite monitoring, and then we're going to do inline monitoring as
Okay.
well.
Okay. And the time frame on that is
Months,
months?
like within a month, hopefully.
Within a month, we're gonna
With
start seeing
composite
some data.
samplers, yeah. Now, that's, hopefully I'm not, over committing and setting up the municipality for under delivering. That's contingent on having a space within an industrial plant to connect to, and that's assuming
And
that we can
access.
control variables, right? There
Yeah.
may be some variables that we can't control.
Understood. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Councillor Maxwell.
Oh, thank you for your report. Yeah, I don't understand a lot about sewer systems, but I have a couple of questions. On the BODs, and I understand what you're saying about the composite samplers. I assume those are going in near where the large users would be. So we have 4 basic large users, I would
Correct.
say, right? And so is there any way that a business or an organization could clean up their practice a little bit while those samplers are in there to throw off your data?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. Again, working through the subcommittee, some of it's in the town and some of it is in the municipality, but there was agreement that I would send a letter. So I did write to the large industrial users. It wasn't, we're blaming you for something because we just don't know at this point in time. But we asked them to be vigilant. We said, you perhaps live in the community like we live in the community. We're obviously going through quite a problem, and this is what our professional consultants have said. We're having large variations of strength of flow. Can you please monitor and make adjustments? Yeah.
Yeah, so you're hoping to see some of those adjustments
Yes.
in your sampling?
And even before the composite samplers, we were watching this, it's a fancy term that the supplier is using, but it's a proxy measurement in RG5. So we're watching that, because that really compares all I don't know what the frequency of that is. It's how many grabs an hour, do you know?
That's actually grabs every minute.
It grabs every minute.
Yeah.
So you really have a trend line, and you'll see a substantive spike in that trend line when something is going on. So we've provided that data to a couple of them as well and said, this is the day we're seeing it, this is the level we're seeing it.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you might be doing something or change a process that would better that
Yeah.
trend line? Yeah.
Okay, and so just still on that same thing, would pre-treating be down the road if those numbers are too high?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Maxwell, the pre-design report that has been commissioned at CBCL is looking at that as an option.
Okay.
So that'll be part of their analysis. Once they have the data, they'll know, maybe it can be accommodated within the treatment technology chosen. Maybe it can't and requires pre-treatment, but that'll be part of that report.
Right, and one last question. This whole process of adding more oxygen and putting in stuff in the water to help and all of that, is this going to be a year-on-year thing? It's going to happen every year, we're going to get a smell and then we're going to have to treat, and or is this going to be ongoing, or what can the community expect? As far as right now, we seem to be in a good spot because we haven't had any smell for a while. So I'm just wondering, is this, every spring we're going to encounter this situation, or what?
Through you, Mayor, to the councillor, I'm channeling back what I hear from the subject matter experts. And they're saying what we're encountering is not and should not be considered part of a typical spring turnover, that this is different than that. And I honestly wish I could stand here and tell you, because we thought we had this under control a year ago. All the partners thought it was under control after that huge investment of money. We do have probes, and we do grabs as well at the plant for things like dissolved oxygen level. And without a doubt, it's going to be hyper vigilant because when it's explained to me, and it's fairly interesting. It was interesting to me anyway. When the bacteria wakes from its hibernating state, it starts eating. It goes into a frenzy like you would. You've just come out of a long winter's nap. And really, that's consuming the oxygen in the water. And they're saying the DO levels, if you watch them carefully enough, you watch your DO levels will trip before you get the odor several days or a week before. So we got to be hyper vigilant and hopefully with the machinery we have in place now, dial up that oxygen when we see those starting to, and instead of waiting for the odor, put the compound in the water that's an enhancing compound. We're hoping that desludging of cell 2 or lagoon 2 this fall will have a positive impact on that. So.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, I guess there's no more questions. I want to thank you for coming to present to us this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So we'll move on now to recommendation and reports. We have our first one here is the biodiversity strategy. So at the June 9th, 2025 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, Deputy Clerk Jennifer West gave a presentation of the town's draft biodiversity strategy that would see land and habitat conservation integrated more strategically into all departments in the community. So the motion would be that council approve the Town of Kentville biodiversity strategy. Moved by Councillor Savage and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Kroll. Is there any discussion on that this evening? There being none. The question is that council approve the Town of Kentville biodiversity strategy. And voting is now open. There we go. Voting is now closed and the motion is carried. The next item is public participation policy. At the June 9th, 2025 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, Director Darren Shoup presented the revised public participation policy for planning applications with a focus on improving communication with residents. The motion would be that council approve policy statement G82 meetings. Oh, I've got the wrong. Oh, that's right. Council approve policy statement G82 meeting and procedure policy as presented. Moved by Councillor Savage. No, it should be, I have the wrong thing there.
Public participation.
Public,
That was from a different template.
right,
So it should read, public participation policy.
okay. That's all we're gonna, yeah,
It's down there and later in the package.
okay. G62? Yeah. All right. So the motion would be that council approve policy G62, public participation policy. And moved by, you're still good with? All right, Councillor Savage and a seconder, Deputy Mayor Kroll. Any discussion on that? I'll call for the question. The council approve policy statement G62, public participation policy. And voting is now closed and the motion is carried. Which one? It's this one, right? It's the rezoning application, isn't it? Yeah, and I put the PID in it. I have it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, got it all done. The next item is rezoning application for 157 Main Street. So the recommendation would be that council direct the CAO to schedule a public participation meeting on the rezoning application for PID 554-67070, 157 Main Street, from R2 to R3 to facilitate an 8-unit apartment building. Moved by Councillor Savage, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. Is there any discussion on that? I'll call for the question that council direct the CEO to schedule a public participation meeting on the rezoning application for PID 554-67070, 157 Main Street, from R2 to R3 to facilitate an 8-unit apartment building. And voting is now open. Voting is now closed and the motion is carried. So we're now going to move on to council reports. All your reports have been added to the package. So I'll open the floor now if any members of council have any questions based on those reports. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to highlight that I continue to sit on the Regional Library Board, and the province has not come forward with the funding formula for your provincial libraries. This summer, you may see words in the media about libraries closing. Maybe not in the Valley, because we have a few more reserves available to us to draw down, but unless the government changes the way they fund libraries, you will see other libraries close. And that should be a red flag to everyone that this needs to be dealt with. And I underline that we only have offered the library the same amount this year as we did last year in the budget. So be aware, it's coming our way. And, you know, vote for your local library when you get to NSFM and make them a sponsor or an advocate for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oops. Okay, we're now going to move on to old business. We have Equity and Belonging Committee appointments. So at the March meeting of council, council approved the Equity and Belonging Plan as an action item related to the Nova Scotia Dismantling Racism and Hate Act, which identifies municipalities as the first public sector bodies required to have plans to address systematic hate, inequity, and racism. So the recommendation this evening would be that council approve the following applications for committee membership to the Equity and Belonging Committee: Orlando Butler Hunt, Sherwin, Tag Canan, I guess, and Dr. Alicia Marega, Mark Albano, and Kathy Ann Browning Johnson. Someone could move that. Councillor Savage, and a seconder. Councillor Baker. Is there any discussion on that? Call for the question that council approve the following applications for committee membership to the Equity and Belonging Committee: Orlando Butler Hunt, Sherwin, I'm going to butcher that last name, Pagtikanan, and Dr. Alicia Marega, Mark Albano, and Kathy Ann Browning Johnson. And voting is now open. Voting is now closed and the motion is carried. Our next order of business is to appoint 2 councillors to this new committee. I put out a call of interest the other day and I had two members that were interested. Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Baker both volunteered to sit on this committee. Are there any other members of council that would be interested in sitting on this committee? There being none, the recommendation would be that council appoint Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Baker to sit on the Equity and Belonging Committee. Someone could move that. Councillor Savage, and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Kroll. Any discussion? That council appoint Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Baker to sit on the Equity and Belonging Committee. And voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Okay, Sanitary Sewer Operating Reserve. It is recommended to council that in the event of a sanitary sewer operating deficit, the final audited deficit value be withdrawn from the Town of Kentville Sanitary Sewer Operating Reserve. Someone could move that, or moved by Deputy Mayor Kroll and Councillor Savage. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the CAO. Just where there's such a differential there and the reduction in that sewer operating reserve, it is going to be more like fall, winter, when we're going to see those sand sewer rates be amended?
More like next month, probably.
Oh, sooner than later.
Yes. Just as they complete the they're very close to finishing
Okay,
that budget up, and then they'll be coming for approval for that and a recommendation of rates,
okay,
hopefully by July, council.
okay, thank you. Okay, July. Thank you.
Okay, call for the question. That in the event of a sanitary sewer operating deficit, the final audited deficit value will be withdrawn from the Town of Kentville Sanitary sewer operating reserve. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Oops. At the April 28th, 2025 meeting of council, first reading was given for proposed amendments to the Town of Kentville's land use bylaw permitting residential conversions of up to 4 units in the limited commercial C3 zone. A public hearing was held June 30th, 2025. The recommendation would be that council give second reading to this and approve amendments to the Kentville land use bylaw to permit residential conversions in the limited commercial C3 zone in a manner substantively the same as indicated on page 2 staff report presented to council dated April 28th, 2025. Moved by Councillor Savage, and a seconder? Second. Councillor Maxwell? Is there any discussion on that? Call for the question. The council gives second reading to and approve amendments to the Kentville land use bylaw to permit residential conversions in the limited commercial C3 zone in a manner substantively the same as indicated on page 2 staff report presented to council dated April 28th, 2025. And voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Moving on to new business, and tonight we're going to appoint a new chief administrative officer. The only thing I think we changed that was the date, right?
No, there's another,
I'll let the interim CAO.
upon advice of the
Yes.
municipal solicitor, we're going to break this into 2 motions.
Okay.
The first motion being that Kentville Town Council appoint Chris McNeil as the Town of Kentville's Chief Administrative Officer beginning July 2nd, 2025.
Any discussion on that? It's too late. No discussion, we'll call for the question. Do you want to put that up there? Yeah. I didn't have these motions, so just Kentville Town Council appoints Chris McNeil as CAO as of, isn't today June 30th, or we're?
Today's June 30th, but we're doing as, he didn't want to sit up here tonight, so we're doing it as of
July 2nd, okay. All right, voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Congratulations.
The second is a procedural motion that Kentville Town Council consent to the CAO performing the duties of the clerk as prescribed in the Municipal Government Act.
Moved by Councillor Savage, and a seconder, Deputy Mayor Kroll. I can't write that fast. Do you have it ready? Oh, okay, here.
At the bottom of that page.
That council consents to the CAO performing the duties of the clerk as prescribed in the Municipal Government Act.
Beginning July 2nd?
That one date doesn't
You
have to
don't
be in
need the
that
date, I
motion.
guess. And voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried.
That'll also allow him to get a proper haircut.
And a new suit. Kidding. So we'll move on now to the draft 2025-2026 operating budget, and I'll give you the floor, CAO.
Thank you, Mayor. So after we met last Monday to talk about budget issues on the 23rd, myself, Director Matthews, have met with Mr. McNeil, and we put our heads together to try to come up with a balanced budget based on the existing residential and commercial tax rates. So, as you're all aware, we were starting from a significant deficit position. So we had mentioned some options we were recommending at that time. First was a transfer from the Valley Waste Regional Management Reserve of $150,000 to deny the request for a grant from Annapolis Valley Mountain Bike Association of $100,000, to postpone part of the recreation master plan, it was $50,000, and to reduce the transfer to the critical incident reserve for policing of $23,000. We've since adjusted that to take a further $14,381 from the King's Transit Reserve, now that we have the new IMSA in place and we know what that exact figure is going to be. We're going to take some of that increase in. And then the new list, we feel we can safely reduce what was planned for the accrual for the vacation and sick leave amount by $20,000. Defer the recreation center and town hall complex consultation, which was $50,000. There was already one study done on that, and there's a desire to come back and work with council. We need to go through the strategic planning process to see exactly where you want to go with this complex before we decide to do more studies on that field. So is $50,000 there. Hoping for a reduction in legal expenses of $25,000. Street signage there was an increase in budget there. We're hoping to go back and with last year's budget amount to save $10,000. Further on the land use planning review and the recreation master plans, in our discussions, it's the preference now to do those in-house as opposed to using consultants to do those studies, but it may take an extra year to get them done because obviously people have to accomplish their regular work duties as well.
What was the cost on those, sorry?
$75,000 for land use was the land use, and the other half of the $100,000 on the recreation master plan. There was some other economic development expense of $5,000 that's been reduced. There's some net changes of transfers in and out, partly related to the deed transfer tax and the capital from revenue to save $100,000 there. We're going to reduce the amount we put in reserve for elections by $32,000. And utilization of a portion of our 24-25 surplus, which is still an audit of $115,000, although it's still projected to come in somewhere around $211,000. So that will get you to a balanced budget. However, it means there will be, by a lot of this is reducing some transfers to reserves or taking money of existing reserves, which will put more pressure on you next year to have to make a tax increase in future years. But this gets us to the direction that we were given last week to come back with a budget with no increase. So I have 5 resolutions that can go on, but I suspect you may want some questions to be answered first.
Thank you, CEO. I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the CAO. You mentioned one, sorry, with respect to the DTT. Sorry, can you repeat that one?
So what we're seeing on the level of deed transfers so far this year, we're comfortable that we can increase the budget for transfer tax by 100,000, but because we have a policy to put in capital, well, it'll just come back off on the other side to be a transfer to the capital reserve.
Okay, and my only other question was with regards to the land use planning, the 75,000 that's now going to be done, in-house through you to the CAO. So what does that look like? I know that we have 2 DOs right now and we have a planner. There's confidence there that work can be done through those 3 individuals to do revisions to the municipal planning strategy, land use bylaw, secondary planning strategies, anything like that?
That's the intent.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions for the CAO? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and CAO. I realize that last time we left you last Monday, there were only 4 representatives here to give you some sort of direction. And I must say that I don't necessarily agree with the direction you were given. But it is where it is, and I appreciate the effort that you and the director and the new CAO have put into finding a solution to the direction. I accept responsibility for that because I don't think I
Councillor
fully
Baker, I'm going to
understood.
stop you because there was 4 people here and you need quorum. So you're entitled to your opinion, but the decision
There was no
made.
vote on the direction given to the.
We gave direction to the CAO. We don't
There was
always
no
have to
vote.
vote to give direction though.
There was no vote.
We don't
given.
always have to vote to give direction. You weren't here and you only need 4 people.
I was here, and I did not agree with the direction, but I
But the
didn't say
direction, it's the
anything.
majority, it's unanimous. The majority of council gave direction to the CAO. And once the decision's been made, that's the decision of council and we move on. So if you have a question about this, then I would encourage you to ask it now, but talking about something that happened last week is not productive right now. It's wasting time. But if you have a question about the budget, by all means, the CAO here is ready to answer your question.
The line item that talks about reducing capital transfers from operations to reserve of 100,000,
Yes.
is that actually putting it into capital reserves? I don't understand the language.
There was a line item in the budget to transfer, to put some from operating into the capital reserve for future capital projects. It's not identified with a specific project, which would be normally how I was used to doing it in other places, but it still is. Many municipal units will try to fund capital projects from operating revenues in the current year. And this was the way it goes in, and then some of it comes back out on specific projects. But this would be reducing that amount going into the capital reserve from the 25, 26 tax rates.
Okay, thank you on that. I can't come up with any other questions specific to that. I'll wait for the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
So under vacation and sick expense reduction, what does that look like? Is that a change in staffing or a reallocation for staffing, or what does that look like?
So that's what's done. We've looked back, there's a trend. It's a relatively new requirement under public sector accounting standards. Some municipal units don't book it at all in their operating funds. They only do it as a consolidation. But in this case, a portion of here you allow vesting of sick benefits, so you have to accrue it. So if there is unused sick time, it has to end up on your balance sheet as a liability. But Director Matthews did an analysis of the recent history and felt, okay, maybe it's our original expense line for that it's not going to increase as much as we thought it would. So she looks at the overall pattern of usage and where there's been a fair bit of drawdown of it in the past recent months. So we're hoping that, and we're being more diligent on making people take their vacation in the year they earn it. That was a weakness in our control systems here, frankly, that needed to be addressed.
Okay. A couple more questions. the accessibility, that was just the consultation there. We're still going to be doing the work for getting ready for accessibility 2030? That's just the studies that were,
Yes, no, I mean, the committee's still going to go through and try to make sure we're getting ready for things, but this is, you know, in particular for what are we going to do with this complex? Need is a much bigger, I think, lift that's going to happen in making a determination of what exactly do you want your municipal complex to look like that will fit within the 2030 guidelines. And just doing a little fix here or there is not going to do it. So it's going to lead to a much bigger discussion as you go through your priority setting with the new CAO. So it was felt that let's not start another study now. Let's do that work with council, put some options in front of you to see where we're going and how we can make it fit within the 2030 targets.
okay. A couple more questions. Sorry, I wasn't here the last meeting. So the planning land use study, with the deductions there, that's just the study. We're not going to be gaining any more people there or losing any more people there. That's
So-
just the study?
Within the original draft budget was to make the second DAO a permanent employee. So that is still in there with this budget.
Okay,
All we were taking out was the actual
the study,
study.
okay. And then the last one is the economic development. What does that look like?
I didn't get into that one much with the director. It was a smaller amount towards the end. I think it was just some fine tuning. She was doing,
$5,000.
yeah, 5,000 within,
Under tourism, that's been eliminated.
yeah.
Okay. I think that that's everything for now, I guess.
Any other questions based on this? Okay, so we have a series of recommendations, sir.
So, following budget resolutions, so first would be that council approve the town of Kentville 2025-26 operating budget in the amount of $18,574,900.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Savage. Is there any discussion on this? Councillor Hamilton.
So I wasn't here for the meeting, but I feel like this is a little bit rushed. I feel like some of the infrastructure in our town has needed to have some work done with it, and I'm really uncomfortable with the fact that we're not doing anything to address that.
Well, this
and that
is an
we're just
operational
moving it.
budget, right? Not a capital one. Capital would deal with the big infrastructure. This is operations.
Okay.
Yeah.
But maintenance needs to.
And the capital budget was passed, what, a month and a half ago.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, I'll call for the first one. That council approved the Town of Kentville 2025-2026 operating budget in the amount of $18,574,900. And voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. The next recommendation is whereas the Town of Kentville requires the sum of $980,316 to be levied against the ratepayers of the town after allowing for all other sources of revenue, be it resolved that the Town of Kentville levy a rate of 1.4262 per $100 of taxable assessed value of residential and resource property in the town, a rate of 3.2962 per $100 of taxable assessed value of commercial property not in Kentville Industrial Park, and a rate of 2.287 per $100 of taxable assessed value of commercial property within the Kentville Industrial Park.
It should be Kentville Business Park.
Okay, we'll fix the business park.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Savage and a seconder.
Second.
Deputy Mayor Kroll. Any discussion on that? Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor, and this is just a comment, and actually Deputy Mayor Kroll and I were having this conversation, and we talked about it a little bit during operating budget with respect to the Kentville Business Park and their rate of 2.287, and whereas within the town nucleus part, it's 3.2962, so that's a substantial differentiation. Understanding that it would take a year or two at minimum to get any sort of movement on that if we were going to amend that rate. It's quite a process.
Would it take 2 years or maybe a year?
Well, depending on how the provincial politicians look on it, we'll decide it. If your local MLA jumps on board fairly quickly, and as the year of the premier, it could happen quicker.
Right.
It would require repealing that old private act.
Okay, and that's how old? I'm looking at Deputy Mayor Kroll.
It's in the 60s.
Okay.
66, I think.
Oh, wow, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Is it possible to offer anything different to this motion, being that we just passed a motion that the budget needs to be 8.5 million? And if I offered that we need to increase our revenue, we're mandated to offer a balanced budget, so this motion is kind of moot.
Well, these are setting the tax rates, right? You still have to make a motion to set the rates.
No, he's saying, he's
Yeah.
asking if you could amend the rate motions without changing the prior, only by, you would have to take less revenue from some other source or more revenue from some other source if you wish to lower these rates. I guess would technically be the case because you've set the expenditure budget with the first motion.
Right.
So you're adjusting within revenue categories at this point.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Any other comments? Okay, call for the question. Whereas the town of Kentville requires the sum of $12,980,316 to be levied against the ratepayers of the town after allowing for all other sources of revenue, be it resolved that the town of Kentville levy a rate of 1.4262 per $100 of taxable assessed value of residential and resource property in the town, a rate of 3.2962 per $100 of taxable assessed value of commercial property not in Kentville Business Park, and a rate of 2.287 per $100 of taxable assessed value of commercial property within the Kentville Business Park. And voting is now open. Did you vote yet, Councillor Baker, or you're still? Yes, I did. Oh, no, you might have to hit it a little bit harder. There you go. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. The third recommendation is be it resolved that the town of Kentville levy an area rate of 0.045 per $100 of all taxable assessed property for the purpose of the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department. Moved by Councillor Savage. Deputy Mayor Kroll is the seconder. Is there any discussion on that? There being none, the question be it resolved that the town of Kentville levy an area rate of 0.045 per 100 of all taxable assessed property for the purposes of the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department. And voting is now open. Voting is now closed.
Carried.
The motion's carried, right?
Yep.
Okay.
It was up there on the screen.
Oh, it was for a second?
Yep.
Okay. The fourth recommendation be it resolved that the town of Kentville levy an area rate of 0.052 per $100 of all taxable assessed property for the purpose of fire hydrant protection by the Kentville Water Commission. Moved by Councillor Savage. Deputy Mayor Kroll. Any discussion on that? Call for the question. Be it resolved that the town of Kentville levy an area rate of .052 per $100 of all taxable assessed property for the purposes of the fire hydrant protection by the Kentville Water Commission. Voting is now open. Motion's carried. And the final one, be it resolved that the town of Kentville levy an area rate of .115 per $100 of all taxable commercial property for the purposes of the Kentville Development Corporation Limited. Moved by Councillor Savage. Deputy Mayor Kroll is a seconder. Any discussion on that? Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. We were in the past doing a levy on residential as well, were we not? And that was deemed to be,
It's not permitted under the
Right.
Municipal Government Act.
oh, yes,
Remember?
that's it. Yes, I do now. Thank you for that clarification.
We've done, and you also differentiated between the industrial park
Yes.
and downtown on too, which you can't do.
Yes.
So we now have one rate for the area rate business.
For both.
The business, so we calculate what the expense was divided over the commercial assessment to come up with a rate.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, there being no more discussion on that, be it resolved that the town of Kentville levy an area rate of .115 per $100 of all taxable commercial property for the purposes of the Kentville Development Corporation Limited. And voting, I never hit anything yet, so I hope. Oh well. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Well, I just want to take a moment and express my heartfelt thanks to the incredible team of staff who worked so diligently and so tirelessly on the town of Kentville's operating budget for this 2025-2026 fiscal year. Your commitment to excellence, careful analysis, and dedication to serving our community have delivered an outstanding result, an operating budget that maintains our essential services, strengthens our priorities, and does all of this with no increases in tax rates for our residents. So in an economic climate where many municipalities are facing difficult choices like we are, our ability to hold the line on taxes while continuing to invest in the things that matter, public safety, infrastructure, parks, community service, it's a reflection of all of your hard work, collaboration, and responsible financial management. And I want to say that I know over the process that building this budget wasn't easy. Took in a lot of long hours and tough conversations with council. But I want to thank you again for your efforts. We have a plan that is balanced, sustainable, and responsible. So I want to thank all the staff and the CAO as well for getting this done. We have a series of correspondence included in our package. They're all there listed. I'm going to move on now to public comments. And I'll invite members of the public to come up to the podium and speak. You'll have 3 minutes. Just state your name and chat away. Well, oh, I knew you were going to come up, Mike. I lured you in.
You did.
Yeah.
You took away one of my questions, so I'm happy to see that the correction on the area rate for business development was made. And happy to see that this year council had to deal with a shortfall coming from the original draft. Having a budget come forward that's all balanced can take some of the decision-making away from council. So that was an improvement, I think, that was discussed last year. So that's good to see. And I hope to see maybe next year when things settle down and Chris is back in the room, an earlier start and maybe a March approval deadline would be awesome. Anyways, that's it.
Thank you very much, and happy Canada Day. Any other public comments this evening? There being none, I would take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Savage and Deputy Mayor Kroll, we adjourn at 7:18. Thank you very much.